I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. Okay, I feel like now that I've had a few good shows, we can discuss.
You coming out of the closet again?
We can discuss how this timeline started. I'm going to film Dead Bird, or not Dead Birds, Dead Owl. Hilariously, I have two different...
Thinking about birds.
2 different 20-minute long
And hilariously,
stories.
I identify kind of as a bird.
I know.
Should I be worried?
When we first met, and I was like, oh, weird, you're a bird of a person. I was like, oh, no. I was at the time literally working on my special.
Called Dead Birds?
Called Dead Birds.
Which was all about you never being able to keep a bird alive.
It was about love. It was about, it was a story. It was like stories about love throughout my life. And I had written this right, like the week before I met you. And there is a 20-minute story in there about all the pets I accidentally killed because I was loving them too much. And then there was also the dead owl story was in this. And so the whole special was called Dead Birds. I forgot about this, and now that we're talking about it, it's making me sad.
Loving your pets equated to like you were washing a bird with shampoo.
No, well, don't blow it. I might film
I'm
it
just
one day.
trying to... It sounded like, oh, you were loving them so
well,
much.
I wasn't like
you killed
fucking them.
Yeah, but you were loving them in a way that was like maybe not thought through. Very sweet, but
yeah, as a child, I was so desperate for love that I wasn't getting from my parents. I took too good of care of my pets and accidentally killed them. Tried to include them in too much of my life in things that were not bird appropriate. Anyway, So I got the opportunity to film this next month, and it kind of came out of nowhere. And I am in the habit of just saying yes to things if it feels right in the moment. And then afterwards I have to deal with oh my God, what the fuck did I say yes to? And my entire relationship with stand-up comedy has been, since I was 21 years old, is I say yes to something that has to do with stand-up. And then I go, what the fuck am I going to do? And then I get up and then I sometimes bomb. It sometimes goes well. And then I end up back in stand-up. And then as soon as it starts to really go well, something else happens and I stop doing stand-up. And so I have been in a stop doing stand-up cycle for 5 solid years. And outside of a few weeks or not even a few weeks, like 1 week in early 2023, I tried to go out and like get dead birds ready to film. So I'm doing that again. And this time there's a little bit of a time crunch because I have to film it at this one specific time. And anyway, so I said yes, and we were on our anniversary trip, and I was having a panic attack the whole rest of the night. Like, what the fuck? I don't even know where these files are. And when I change timelines every few years in my life, I like delete the files. Or it feels like I've deleted the files. Like I'll live somewhere for years and then I move. And then when I go back there to visit, I can't remember where anything is. And similarly, this happens with stand-up where I feel like I can't possibly do this again. And I have stage fright, which is a weird quality for someone who does stand-up. I feel like a lot of other people are very comfortable on stage, and I don't have that. I feel like we talked about this, but I deleted it, I guess, maybe. Anyway, so I booked probably 20 shows so I could practice this story. And the first show was in Philly. I don't know, like 3 weeks ago. It was February 28th. And it was like I couldn't remember how to do it or something. Like I had not super practiced the story. I went to lunch with my family rather than just like spending the day alone, but then also had too much time alone. And if I spend too much time alone, I forget how to talk. If I get in my phone, I forget how to communicate. And then halfway through the day, something happened, like startled me, and I ended up like and I was like super dissociated for the rest of the day. And I could not like get back in my body. And I was like mindful of the fact that I couldn't get back in my body. And I was trying to do like nervous system exercises or whatever. It was very strange. So I get to the show in Philly and they've put me on last. I think that people don't know I haven't done stand-up for years because I just showed back up on Facebook and was like, hey, I need some stage time. And so I think if people don't follow me on Instagram, they don't realize that I quit stand-up years ago. And so they put me on last on this showcase, and I got on stage. I said 5 sentences, and then I had a panic attack.
And walked off.
And I was like, sorry, I can't do this. I walked off the stage, and the club people were so nice, and they were treating it like a medical emergency, and I was very tempted to let them believe it was a medical emergency.
Call an ambulance, please. Let's make this look like I really need this.
One of the comics is trying to hand me like his food. They're like, everyone's giving me a bottle of water. Thank God there was someone, because kind of what happened too was there were supposed to be 2 more comics in front of me, and then they didn't show up. And so like, all right, you're next, which did not help with the already like dissociated thing. And so luckily, as I was getting ready to get on stage, one of the guys who was supposed to go before me had run up and he was like, oh, can I go first? Can I go first? And they're like, it's too late. The guy's already going to announce her. And so he was there chomping at the bit. And luckily he went up and crushed and closed the show. Because if it would have just been like an awkward end to the show, that would have been horrible. So then I went into the green room, and to my dismay, they did not have a window for me to jump out of. So I actually just had to sit and be like, I'm going to have to walk back out. And what I did not know was it was mostly people there to see me. And I did not find that out until later that night when I got concerned emails and messages on social media that, it was a friendly audience, but the way when I'm in that like space, I perceive everyone as like scowling at me. And when I listened back to the recording, the experience I had was I got on stage and I said like 5 lines and no one laughed. And I experienced everyone that's like scowling at me. And turns out they were all friends and they were laughing on the recording. And I'm like, fuck, okay. Forgot about this part. Forgot that while I enjoy writing stand-up, performing is a nightmare that I had to really condition my body to doing. So I called my doctor and asked her for some beta blockers because we don't have that kind of time. And huge fan of the beta blocker because mentally I've never cared less if what anyone thinks. You know, when I was younger, I would look at the one person in the audience who hated me or whatever and focus on that. But it's like, I don't care. It's like reality is subjective. I'm not for everyone. At this point in my life, I have fully accepted that. I don't even really care if it doesn't go well as long as like I know I've done well. But you cannot convince my body that strangers are not here to burn me at the stake. I don't know what that is, but you cannot, even with all the nervous system work I've done, that takes a minute for me to like regulate. So beta blockers just turn that off. And this podcast is now sponsored by beta blockers. Anyway, then on the lunar fucking eclipse, I went and did a hookah lounge in Fayetteville, North Carolina during a North Carolina versus Duke game. So there were 6 people in that audience. It was a mess. Anyway, so I bombed there, but I at least finished the set. And then I've just been living in a reality for the last couple of weeks where I'm like, I don't know that I can do this anymore. But then we went to Asheville this weekend and it was nice.
Got your sea legs.
Finally,
back.
I got my sea legs. So anyway, I'm going back to stand up. Just kidding. But that is just, you need to know that that's a potential that I might end up just back in stand up because this is how she comes and gets me. I don't want to travel though, so I don't know how we would figure that out. I would have to do exclusively like residencies 5 minutes from the house. So you guys are going to have to come to bumfuck North Carolina because we drove home after the show last night because I can't sleep in an Airbnb bed made of rocks. How are you feeling?
I'm good.
You sure?
I got sweaty feet and sweaty hands and a sweaty spine. I'm a clam.
You're a clam?
Full clammy.
This has been an interesting eclipse season, I guess, for both of us. Another thing that's interesting is the astrology is very similar with Venus specifically and the nodes, very similar to the spring of 2017. And the spring of 2017 is when the awakening kicked in. This mass awakening really started. A lot of people woke up in 2017. And the similarities between what I've got going on in my life right now and what I had going on in my life in 2017 are very interesting. Are there similarities for you or like parallels for you? Because you started going through a big awakening and deciding you were going to change. You're like, I don't know when anything in my life
I'm like
happens.
so bad with the timing of things. It's hard for me to remember exactly what was going on in 2017. I mean, I was going through so much change from, I guess around 2017 to 2022 was just like a blur.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess there are some similarities with this one particular thing that we'll probably get into, which is just this like uncomfortableness with myself and just being. I mean, obviously I'm like changing, so it's like hard to just, what is being? I don't know. I'm dissociated. Don't feel like myself. And so I think the desire to escape the emotional turmoil of whatever that is, just being with myself. And so trying to grab external things that under the guise of like, you know, expanding my consciousness and healing, I think we can kind of fall into little traps of adjusting our internal state with external things and become addicted or become identified with that as our mode of expansion. And so, yeah, I've had cannabis was always, it was a huge part of my awakening, and then psychedelics and things. Psychedelics are a little more difficult to abuse. And so I have spent since then multiple times of trying to stop it, like to just stop smoking and try to regulate myself. But then in time, I would want to go back and try to find some balance with it. And then come to find out I still couldn't balance it. So I would it would start off with just a couple times, like to feel good and kind of decompress. And then before I know it, I'm like daily high. And once again, escaping the just uncomfortableness of being with myself and all the different capacities that I'm unlocking and discovering that are difficult to deal with. And I think there is a place for exploring external things, and there's like benefits, but then again, like this whole thing that I've kind of known since the beginning. Alan Watts has a great quote that like when you get the message, you can hang up the phone. Like once you've got the message, you're done. And I feel like equating that to certain states where you use a psychedelic to experience a certain state and understand that, and putting the phone down is then going, okay, I'm going to stop using that and figure out how to get there myself, or just not use the external version. And so oscillating off and on of that has been quite the like adventure. And oddly enough, you've noted that like around December is always when I kind of tend to move back into the cannabis world.
Yeah. So I want to give a quick calendar recap. I remember everything on a calendar, and the pattern here is interesting. So from what I can tell from your life before we met, you started smoking weed daily consistently around 2016. This is around the same time where, if you were being honest with yourself, you would have left the band.
Yeah.
I mean, probably 2 years in, but like it started to hit a fever pitch around Bernie. You were campaigning for Bernie, kind of that era, right?
Yeah.
So like fall of 2016, you start smoking weed pretty consistently to survive doing a bunch of things you don't want to do. Spring of 2017, when I'm talking about, is when you start going through a little bit of an awakening. This is around the time you read the Bruce Lee book, and you're starting to feel this kind of dissatisfaction through 2017. Early 2018, things hit like a fever pitch, and you start going through like the crazy awakening. You're smoking weed all day, every day. And that's how you're surviving, living a life you don't want to live. And you go further and further in, and you're able to grasp all these concepts because you're very high. You start psychedelics, I think, in 2018 as well. And then we meet in early 2020, and you are smoking. You're still like in the getting your mind blown every day part of awakening. And you are smoking. Am I exaggerating by saying 6 blunts a day?
There were probably a couple times I was doing 6 a day. But no, I mean, in my head, like the average was 3 blunts a day.
Okay, by yourself though.
By myself, big fatty blunts, like with backwoods or Swisher Sweets, and just chock full. I mean, a lot of weed. I'd have a really high tolerance. I got a high metabolism, and then I'm high functioning, and so it was difficult for me to get blasted high where I was not functioning. I could smoke a lot of weed, so it's very easy for me to kind of abuse it.
You continue to smoke like that until the fall, like August of 2021. And you quit because it is making you really irritable and anxious. And it was causing kind of issues with us and kind of issues with you. Like,
for me, it was like all relationships.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it was like difficult to just be with myself. Like it had to be high to deal with anything.
Right.
And that starts to just make you like, just to survive normalcy, you're like trying to smoke and can't regulate emotions or anything, you know?
Right.
But I'm in denial because like the high of smoking feels like you're integrating it or you're dealing with the emotions. But it's a sobering fact that like after a while you realize like I'm not integrating any of this. This is some kind of bypass or something. I believe I'm balanced, but it's not.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about weed, and I don't have, you know, I think it's I can't smoke it because it makes me extremely like paranoid. I have mixed feelings. I don't have mixed feelings. I have prejudices I have judgments about altering all day, every day. Yeah. I understand it. I've done it. I don't know how much anyone can integrate anything if they're altered all day. That being said,
you learned that lesson early on and you were able to like get the message and hang up the fucking phone.
Right.
And so you that's a like, yeah, it's a valid perspective. I think some people can't get there if they haven't experienced the hamster wheel and that there's no way out, you know?
Right. And I know some people who medicate their anxiety, self-medicate their anxiety and their depression and stuff with it. And I get it. And so I don't really have judgments. Like I don't care what anyone else does. But in my experience, yeah, I don't know. I know a lot of people who smoke weed all day, and for them, they feel like this is calming me down, this is grounding me, or whatever. But a lot of times, the people in my life, I don't want people to get defensive listening to this, but
it's a hard subject.
It is a hard subject because it's huge in the spirituality world. And so this is just us talking about our experiences. Yeah. And if it's triggering you, I guess maybe that's something to figure out because we're not here to tell you what to do. But in my experience with people who my first marriage, his weed use and inability to regulate his emotions while high on weed did have a lot to do with our breakup. And then I have other people very close to me where the weed actually makes you anxious, but you don't realize it's making you anxious. You think it's calming you down, but it's just creating like a safe space in your head. And when anyone pulls you out of that safe space in your head by needing to have a conversation about literally anything that's not a weed, like a high person conversation, the person who's smoking a lot of weed can get very snippy. And this is a pattern I've noticed in a lot of people who smoke a lot of weed. And the capacity to handle real life stuff often is shrunk. Now, I have a couple friends who are not like this at all. So this is a pattern I see in a lot of people. This is not everyone. I know a couple people who I can't imagine dealing with them if they didn't smoke weed. But so anyway, you quit smoking because you had no capacity for anything. And then also there's this hamster wheel when you smoke cigarettes, smoke weed. I got like this with hot beverages. When you have like your dopamine set to something to where if you don't have the perfect amount of that thing in your system, that's all. It's like, I fucking hated that about cigarettes. It's like, I would feel great after I smoked a cigarette, but then if something was keeping me from smoking another cigarette, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was like in the ether and there was just a lot going on. You quit. You were really not fun for a few weeks. And then this other version of you, which I had never met.
Right. Because when we met, I was deep in.
You smoked so much weed and you were very functioning, you know, but this other man shows up that I'm like, holy shit. And you jumble words always a little bit, but on weed,
make no sense.
I just thought you were kind of I would have to like read the vibe of what you were saying because there was 400 words per word that needed to be there, you know? And I just thought that was you and I thought it was a quirk of you or whatever. But then as the weed gets out of your system and you have like clarity and stuff, this other guy shows up who is, I don't know, very different. And I was very into him. And then I got pregnant. And then life became kind of, I think, a bummer because I was sick while I was pregnant. So you had to do everything. So your life suddenly was like taking care of 3 kids and, you know, cooking all the meals, taking care of the house, whatever. I was literally in bed the whole time. And so that one really made sense because you were just like pretty over it. And it was hard to see like how fun life is sober when life was kind of a bummer. And then we found out that the baby had passed, and we had this like fucking purgatory we had to sit in and wait for it to actually happen. And you decided like this would be a good time to be high.
Yeah. Genius.
And that one was rough because you were kind of it felt like you were having the time of your life because you were back on weed, you know? And so I tried to smoke it once, and it was living hell. I was like, I'm going to die. You're going to die. We're all going to die. You know, it's really bad. And then and when you first started smoking it, you're like, I'm just going to smoke it for the studio. And then at one point it became obvious that you were feeling like you had to stay in the studio all day to stick to what you said.
Yeah.
Like, I'm only going to smoke it when I'm making music. I'm not going to smoke it otherwise.
Let's make music all day long.
And then you could just tell you were just like hanging out in the studio. And I was like, you can smoke it at the house. I don't give a shit. And then you smoked it for, it was exact in 2021 to 2022. It was the exact same thing. You smoked it until August. It went back to like smoking it all day, anxiety, snippiness, whatever. So you quit again in August, and then the other Mark comes back and you're vibing. And then we decide to sell the house in the winter in December, the exact same time of year. And you're like, I feel like I need to make music in the studio before we do this. And I feel like I need weed for that.
Yeah, because and it's essentially the pattern here is like every time life hits and it's difficult, can I go grab the weed, please?
Yeah.
To make it a little easier.
And winter's interesting because you're supposed to power down. And it's almost like you're in resistance to powering down.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that conversation, because I think I was like victimizing myself on you smoking weed, because this is back before I did nervous system work. So you being snippy it's like the fucking end of the world to me. So I'm like, I don't want you to smoke weed because then you're snippy guy, you know? And so you're like, I'll quit it as soon as we get to the new house. And one thing about weed with you as a projector is it lets you bypass being a projector. And so you have way more energy to do things you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do.
Right.
Which feels like a plus, but it's not though, right?
Because it's not real energy. I'm getting the energy. It's like, it's a bypass. Like,
right.
I mean, I had to figure that out. It's like, there's so many narratives you can create that it's not that. Again, because the state feels so good.
Right.
And when you're in that state, you can convince yourself of all the reasons why this is good. This is healthy. And I'm also being aware of my shadows, and I'm working to release those, because the greatest thing to me about cannabis is it drops your boundaries of things that you're not usually able to conceive and deal with. Like when the weed's there, it's like you can deal with it all of a sudden. And so there's this illusion that you are really like touching these things and you're integrating them and you're understanding. But I had to learn over time by like coming off and on of them and creating these kind of feedback loops that then put me into a situation where I'm like now at a paradox. Like what I was thinking I was achieving I'm actually not achieving. And so it's an illusion, I think. But it's just so subtle. It's like one of those things where you can't see it when you're in the state, you know? So
right.
Having to come off and on it and being able to experience those things was the thing that I think I knew a lot of the time, but I was in denial of because I just had these other narratives that I wanted to support my desire to go do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So then, so we moved here, and then you kept smoking weed, I want to say until June. Yeah, it was June of 2023, because it was at the same time I was doing nervous system work that you were quitting weed, which made this house kind of intense for a few weeks. And then you didn't smoke it. You got through a whole winter without smoking it. And that winter, instead of going back to weed, you finished an album without weed, completely unaltered. And we struggled to record to start a podcast. We've been trying to have a podcast together since we first met. And in the early days, I would have you on my podcast and you would roll a blunt before we would record, which now I look back and go, yeah, of course that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Because then it turns into like high conversation.
Talk. Yeah.
And so within this sober period, we start to actually put together Projector on the Flail, and it's great. And then Karen Rontowski tells me about Kava. And I go, oh, that sounds like something Mark would like. And my dumbass buys you Kava.
In the long run, not dumbass. It was what I needed. But yes, I get it.
And I have to say, I do think that Kava, because podcasting's hard. I think that people think it's easy because it just sounds like a conversation. But when a microphone's in your face, it creates social anxiety. You know, it creates like stage fright. And it takes a long time to learn how to do that if you're not trained in talking into microphones or whatever. And so I do think
really authentic. Yeah. It's difficult.
And so I do think that because the Kava started right around the time we started this podcast, I do think the Kava helped smooth in for you the entry into like podcasting. Right.
It made me like talkative and like confident, and it helped like dialogue and stuff. It just like loosens the
right. Where now it's like, you know how to, and it's the same thing with me and stand up. It's like if I'm doing stand up all the time, I don't deal with stage fright, but I take a years long break, I come back and it's a mess. And that's why beta blockers. I want to add like beta blocker ads to this. Anyway, I'm probably going to take the beta blocker stuff out. I think it's funny to simultaneously talk about using substances
external, and then you're like, beta blockers. This is brought to you by Pfizer. Yeah, I thought about that right in the beginning when you were just toting beta blockers. I was like, we're about to get into the philosophy of grabbing external things.
Well, I want to talk about that paradox because there's something so interesting. There's something so interesting about this and the Vyvanse and everything else at the same time. So I get you Kava, and immediately after, Lacey is here visiting and says, Kava's really bad for your liver. And I don't know what it is with me. I think because I know you're not going to break up with me, there is a part of me that's like, we got to keep this man alive. You know what I mean?
You selfish bitch.
I think in the past, when I fall in love, I become like afraid of being rejected, but I just like know you're not going to leave me. And so I'm like, he's going to die, And so I'm just trying to fucking keep those organs functioning. I mean, you're like 8 years younger, so I should go first, but she says it's bad for the liver, and you're already marking the Kava. The Kava you're already doing mark doses of the Kava. And so
high metabolism is a great thing in a lot of ways.
In some ways not. It's pretty expensive.
But in the moment, it's like, oh, this is great. I can go full bore here and not really fall victim to it. I can kind of like sustain it.
Yeah. Do you think it means if you have a high metabolism, it just means that you build up tolerance faster? But does that mean it's less taxing on your organs or more?
I'm not really sure. I think at a certain point, it's always going to get toxic. But maybe there's a bit of a stamina more so than others. But again, it's not necessarily good. I'm just saying in the moment, it's nice to be able to play with it and go further and like experience the wide array of that without it like making me get sick or something. I very rarely got the spins or anything from the amount of cannabis I was smoking. The only time I ever get spins is when I was mixing shit. If I ever had like early on when I was still drinking, 2015-ish, when I first started smoking. It wasn't heavy until 2016, 2017, but I started in LA before I moved to Nashville and was drinking. And when I combined those two, good Lord, that's the worst combination. And then the same thing in other places, like Kava with weed or Kava with kratom or cigarettes. It's like, then it starts to really become an issue. But having the metabolism, I don't know if it's just processing it quicker but it's obvious when I've tried to quit weed, the shit's in my system still. It's like my metabolism is not necessarily clearing it quickly. I spend weeks with clammy hands and sweating and just having to detox the THC, which is not fun.
Not fun. So the Kava, I want to say the Kava started in like June, July.
And we talked about Kava on here a lot because I was...
Yeah, you've converted a lot of people to Kava. And it's funny because there's people reaching out to me going, hey, I'm trying to figure out like, where do you guys get Kava? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about the Kava. And they're like, how do I get a hold of Mark? And I'm like, I don't fucking... He's on some
So the
shit.
Kava, just to be clear, I mean, everything is... I think everything needs balance. But Kava by itself, to me, was... I didn't find abusive tendencies with it. And
Yeah.
That plant, the research that I did, it's like it's pretty helpful. It's like medicinal in ways, but all of these things have slippery slopes into like, why are you using it? And then when you're starting to use it a lot, like ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is it, most people say it's because I enjoy it, I want to do it, but behind that is an escape of some sort. And Kava is great for people that are alcoholics and want to get into something that has similar effects but way less dangerous on the body. What we're going to get into, where like the Kava led me into the Kava kratom mix that fucked a lot of stuff up, and so I guess it's tied to that. But I just, Kava by itself, I haven't seen that many people. I haven't looked into it too much, but I haven't seen many people abuse it. And I think the liver thing Lacey was talking about were people that are like they're taking like jugs of kratom a day. I mean, Kava.
Yeah. So at one point we go on a family vacation and we go on a little road trip to a Kava bar to get more Kava.
Yeah, because I was out of Kava for the trip.
Because we then got your sister hooked on Kava.
So we go to a Kava bar, which they have those. Which this wasn't. There's some cool Kava bars I think in LA that are like actually like medicinal plant, kind of like spiritual, like clean place. This place was like a regular bar, it looked like, and very dingy.
Yeah, and it had regular bar vibes.
Yeah, very, very weird. Not what I expected when we went there. But yeah, so then I asked for some like straight Kava, which they had in like a milk carton. It like looked even kind of dingy, but it was their like mixture and it was good. And then they were like, oh, we also have this, these like little botanical things. And one of them was I forget the name of it, but it was like, yeah, it's mostly Kava and then a little bit of kratom. And then they had another thing called Feel Free, which was the same thing, Kava and kratom. And so I was like, oh, cool, I've never tried these. And I noticed on it, because I have experimented with kratom in the past, just because I was curious about it and didn't really like it that much. I think the only time that I used it a lot was when I actually had severe nerve pain in my shoulder and was trying to deal with the pain. That I got into like a little bit more heavy use of the kratom.
And getting off of that sucked.
That helped the pain, but then, yeah, it didn't, my body was rejecting it. Like the taste of it and stuff is like my stomach just, it doesn't feel great. And so once the nerve pain went away, then I had to get off of that. And that was like a little rough, but it wasn't like, I wasn't into heavy use. So it was maybe 3 days of a little bit of a sick feeling getting off of it, but it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
And so when I saw on the botanical thing that it was like, because even the guy said, he's like, this is mostly Kava, there's a little kratom in it. And so I was like, oh, I kind of like my ears perked up because I was like, I like the feeling of kratom, and oh, maybe it's just like a little bit in here. Like, cool, that sounds fun. And so I grabbed 2, and I think I didn't try it until like the next day. But I remember having half of it, because you're supposed to have just one a day, and so you have half of it at one point, half of the next. And I remember being like, damn, this is really great. Like this, it feels, I have this slight euphoria, but then there's this like chattery socializing thing that comes from the Kava. And so I was like, this is a great little tool. And when we got back home after that trip, I was looking to like refill the Kava that we were using. But then I was also like, I'm going to go explore these little botanical bottles too, because this might just be a little nice thing on the go, or like if we're on the road, I can just stash a couple of these. Much easier to prepare than the Kava. And that's when it began, the slow grabbing obsession, addicted qualities of that fucking concoction that is.
And that part went very fast because you very quickly stopped drinking kava and you just switched to the feel freeze.
Just to the feel freeze, yeah. Kava was out. We still have kava, like jars of kava in there that I haven't touched because I was into the feel free.
Yeah, because then we went on a vacation and you were we went to family reunion and you were like, it'd just be easier for me to take these feel frees than pack the kava to take to the thing. Yeah. And so you brought feel freeze, and then feel freeze became a daily part. You know, there was always a feel free bottle sitting here when we're doing a podcast. Yep. And then one feel free a day turned into 2 feel frees a day. And then you stayed around 2, which is...
I stayed around 2 because there was, I knew it was a slippery slope. Like in the beginning, I knew I had to be careful with this, but I also was okay with going into the dark shadows of it. And I trusted that I would get myself out. So it was always there. And I kind of let myself use it to a certain extent, but I had done some research too that there were a lot of people that quickly moved into 5 a day, some then 12 a day. And those stories that those people told of trying to get off of that were horrendous, like very, very scary. And I did know a little bit of the effects of trying to get off kratom, that I knew there was a darkness there that was going to be really, really difficult to detox from, and withdrawals and all that stuff. So I guess part of me, like, I needed the experience of doing it, and I just trusted that I was gonna do that, you know. And we would butt heads every now and then. Well, we had like a big argument at one point because you freaked out and we're like, "Yo, you're gonna kill yourself. Like, you have to stop." And I was like, "Bitch, don't tell me what to do. I got this." Which I'm thankful for that you allowed me to do that. But I didn't want to let myself go more than 2 a day, and I probably 3 or 4 days I did 3, and 2 of those days I puked from doing it. And so I knew my body was like, this is not right. Like, but mentally you want to figure this out, okay, do it, but your body is like fucking rejecting it, you know. And so then I would puke and be like, okay, well that's the ceiling, I guess. And I can't imagine trying to kind of go more than that, you know? So I'm glad that I didn't push anymore. However, it was 2 a day for, what is that? You know the time better. 7 months?
8 months.
8 months. 2 a day.
Yeah.
And these things are not cheap.
No. I mean, you had like brokered a deal with the local gas station guy.
Dude, yeah, it was awesome because he I would come in there like after a couple weeks. He was like, "Wow, you really like this stuff, huh?" And then he was like, "Oh, I have this other guy that comes in here. There's only 2 people that come and get this stuff. It's you and this other guy. But the other guy comes in and buys a case a week." He's like, "I can give you a good deal on the case if you want. If you buy it online, it's like 100 and something. You buy it here, I'll give you $80." I was like, "My man." So then I had this whole setup with him. Like he was ordering extra for me, and that gas station is 2 blocks from here.
Yeah, that's still outrageously expensive.
Yeah. Also, as you stated, and I was pissed when you told me it, but it should be noted, like, this product is in a dingy gas station.
Yeah.
What is the quality of it?
Well, because you had watched a video of the guy who put it out, who's toting it as some sort of spirituality tonic, some sort of body hack.
And this is the fucked part of it. And that is like so frustrating to me and so scary is that, and I don't know if that entire ad campaign is AI. You know, like that's what we're getting into this place where I'm highly convinced when I'm on TikTok and there's like a person and they're explaining a product, like, this is so good, and you can feel their energy. I'm like, well, I like this guy's energy. Like, if he's using it, I'm going to do it. And so I had seen videos of a guy that's like, I don't know if he's a real doctor or something, but he seemed legit and had a lot of other really great information on like biohacking the body that I resonated with. And then he would mention this feel-free thing that he had created, and it was from the medicinal plants of like ancient tribes. And so it's all a part of this new age thing that like can suck you in and make you think that this isn't something too dangerous. And then there were other people that were like health nuts that are like bodybuilders, and they would use the feel-free to enhance their workouts. And so they had this idea that like the chemical makeup of the plants actually help your body gain muscle and detoxify, all these things that, yeah, might be true on some level, but we're not talking about like the kratom aspect of this. And then what are you doing to this concoction that seems to now be, most people understand it's a highly concentrated version of kava and kratom. And when you concentrate something, it amplifies the effects. Some people think they're fermenting the kratom. And they're not really clear on what they're doing, their secret concoction, because under the guise of business is like, we're not going to tell you our recipe. It's our secret thing. So there's some shadiness to it. And everybody knows kratom is like, it's an opiate. It's so addictive. So they're pushing this thing and they know you're going to get addicted to it.
Yeah.
And then they skirt that by fine print on the bottle, 1 a day, do not abuse. This is highly abusive. And it even says
highly addictive. Yeah.
It says have half, 1 shot, 1 serving is half. And then 2 servings a day is all you should ever take.
Right. So
but
then
they know
it's
so addictive. Who's going to be able to like stick to that?
Exactly.
It says the same thing on alcohol, everybody abuses it.
You can't take alcohol and then go about your day. You know what I mean?
And the thing that to me is the most frustrating is the goddamn name. Feel free? No. Feel fucked and get trapped. It's like feel like you're in jail. Because that's what it quickly moved into. It was originally like it helped me feel free, as in like I can talk and I can feel really blissful. But after a couple weeks, it's like to feel normal, I have to have the thing.
Yeah.
It's not about feeling free. It's like I just need to feel fucking stable, so let me have this. And then you're in denial kind of like, well, I know I'm addicted, but like I don't want to feel sick, and maybe not this week. I got these other 5 things I need to do. I can't stop now because I know I'm going to spend weeks like being
sick.
Yeah. So it just creates this like really aggressive hamster wheel that's like I've never experienced something like more difficult to put down.
So in recovery circles, I know a lot of people that have used kratom to get off of dope, to get off of actual opiates. And I've seen them then get addicted to kratom, and I've heard about the withdrawals and everything else. So the very first time I saw kratom like in your cabinet, I was like, ugh, I did not have a good, I think it can be very helpful for people. And I think as like to have something in your home to treat pain or whatever, but I am very weird about opiates in general because there's something about that specific receptor in the human system that it's just gnarly. I don't know. The opioid epidemic, it touched me greatly. I lost a lot of people to opiates, and yeah, so I was always sketched on kratom. And so something that's interesting to think back on is that when you were sober for 1.5 years, you were so different than when I first met you. You had like insane depression. Like you would go into these dark, like deep, dark, like I was afraid of you trying to leave the realm. Mm-hmm. And you had intense mood swings and not a lot of resilience, like not a lot of space. And what, we met, you were in burnout. So that's part of it. You also had many tics. Like you had a lot of these like noises and stuff you make, which we've talked about on the podcast. Those went away when you were sober for 1 year. And you also did not have depression. And for a long time, I think I attributed that to ketamine, because you did do ketamine therapy after quitting weed. Mm-hmm. But I've now realized that it's also connected to altering for you, because once you were sober for a long time, like a lot of these things leveled out. So when the Feel Free took over, within like 2 months, we went into this phase where you were closed off and isolated. We talked about it on the podcast. You just wanted to kind of be alone. You didn't want to talk to anybody. You didn't want anything to do with anybody. It was right around that time. It's a surprise party. And I'm like, oh my God, did I make a huge mistake? He doesn't want to be, because before you started the Feel Free, you had become much more interested in socializing and being out and doing things, and you were healthy and you were working out. And then you went inward and stuff. And that's all the behavior of someone who's on drugs, And so then I guess it was December again, you were like, I'm going to smoke weed. I think it's going to help me get off the Feel Free. And this is before I expressed any major concerns about the Feel Free. I would just ask every once in a while, like, how many of those are you doing a day? But I could feel the PDA pretty quick. And so I kept my thoughts to myself. And I hadn't really looked too far into it. And I also didn't connect you being very weird for like 3 months to the fact that you were taking the feel free.
Mm-hmm.
But now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Because you'll go through like internal things, but this went on for months.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when people are altering, is that they start to close off to people around them. And so then you discover legal weed, or previously legal weed. They're cracking down on it at the exact same time that you quit. But they have like hemp stores that do THCA.
Yeah.
Which is basically...
Yeah, I don't know what it's some chemical like backdoor where they can get it through and it's legal to do, but I don't know. Their thing is like, if you ingest this, you just get the CBD healings of it. But it's like more powerful CBD. But the only way the THC is activated is if you burn it. I was like, well, yeah, that's just like normal fucking weed, right? Like
I guess if you ate a bud, you would get high.
You would get high. So the only difference is like this can't be activated via your stomach. You've got to activate the THC when you burn it. So, however, I got to say, I mean, THC, it's not the same.
Yeah,
it's very subtly different, but it doesn't give you the same high. So again, I was like, well, this is great. Then maybe I won't be able to abuse this. And you know, my reason for doing it was this like idea, which is stupid if I had just stopped and thought about it, but was that I was like bored and I wanted like another thing to kind of be able to play with. And I knew the feel free was not good and I wanted to get off of that. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go back into this thing that I won't be able to abuse and it'll help me get off the kratom. It was just a druggie talking, trying to find reason to go do something else, you know?
And the same plan as before. I'm only going to smoke it creatively. I'm not going to do it every day.
And the thing I wanted to say, that like the idea of my reasoning was like, I'm bored, was just kind of saying like, I feel like I've done a lot of healing and like I'm expanding my awareness and I understand a lot of like who I am. And I feel like I'm never done with that, but I'm just bored with this like kind of mundaneness of reality. And I want to make it a little more fun. Now, I've previously toted the idea that like boredom is the opposite side of creativity. So if you're bored, it just means you're not looking at reality from a creative perspective of like being able to explore like all the different things that you think are mundane, but from a different perspective are really beautiful. And from that comes curiosity and creativity. So if you're bored, it's not like the thing isn't to go grab some external thing to make it not be bored. It's that your internal perspective is off. And that's all that is. You can adjust that yourself. You don't have to have an external thing to change it, you know. But in the place that I was at, that's like what I made sense of it in my head. And I just didn't think too much deeper about it, you know, because the desire really, if I get down to the brass tacks of this, the desire to go grab the thing is like, I'm just uncomfortable with being with myself. And this is maybe a new layer of myself. Like I have become comfortable with certain other versions of myself that I've now found and I'm like integrating, but there's always new things we're finding and discovering. And that's uncomfortable. It just is. It's the human thing. But that's where like, once I kind of realized that, I was like, fuck, I'm doing it again. Like I'm just trying to escape this. Yes, my desire is true, like that I just want to go do that thing. And okay, now I'm awake. So a part of being awake is not like escaping the world, be in the world and enjoy God's creations. Like he made kratom. He made did I just call God he? It's that thing.
We'll edit a sh into the beginning of that.
Or not even a sh, it's just a it. But
shit. God is shit.
It's a shit. That too. So yeah, I think that's where, like, for me, I'm like, this is just a hamster wheel. We're always doing this. We're just...
Well, wait, I want to... So the thing that's funny about this moment is you decide you're going to start smoking weed again. And how do I say this? Because I say I don't have a judgment about it, but I kind of do. Judgment is weird. It's like I have my own opinions about things. And we'll get into, like, my own experiences with altering or whatever. But I also have wounds around it, you know, and... Yeah, I do have preconceived notions about the necessity of extended periods of sobriety in order to integrate consciousness. I do believe that. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. If you're listening and you feel like you're an exception to that, that's fine. My opinion actually doesn't matter, but I am of the opinion. And then with you, I did experience a very different version of you when you weren't altering. And all that said, at the exact same time you were deciding to now add weed to it, I finally kind of buckled and was opening up to doing ADHD meds. And in my head, I'm like, I'm going to use ADHD meds for 6 months to reprogram I guess I was saying 6 months to a year. I now think it'll be 6 months, if that, to reprogram my dopamine to healthy habits, because I have kind of deteriorated over the last 5 years into like short dopamine seeking with the phone. And for me, it's just like hot beverages or whatever. And you're not a pharmaceutical guy at all. And so we have the weed talk first, which I'm obviously not stoked about the weed, but it's not my place, right? So it's the dynamic of this relationship is we are two individuals sharing a life together, but the relationship can never be like a leveraging point to force us out of experiencing whatever we would organically experience if we weren't together. And so it's a lot of having to go, okay, well, I don't agree with it, but you're free to experience whatever you need to experience, I guess. Here's my boundaries,
Yeah.
And so it's like we had the weed conversation, and then I think it was like 24 hours later, I was like, by the way, I've decided I'm going to start taking Vyvanse for 6 months because I've not left the couch for years, and I'm going to hurt my body. And you hated it.
But I kept my mouth shut. You
got so triggered, and then you had a few reasons for why it was a bad idea, and then I was like, well, I have to do it. I have to check it out. I have to decide. So it's the same, it's kind of the same thing. And you're like, okay, I guess we're just taking turns doing things the other one thinks is a bad idea.
Yeah. I don't remember telling you, it wasn't like, don't do this. I was like, here's my take on it as someone that doesn't like any of those things. I think they're all potentially dangerous, just because they're fake substances, they're synthetic or whatever. But I didn't want to, because I knew I could feel the hypocriticalness of me of like saying, oh no, you can't do that. It's like, well, that's just my version. You're doing the same thing with me. So I'm going to honor and let you go experience this. And I trust that you'll get yourself out of it, and you need to have that experience. So.
Yeah. I mean, you would never tell me no, but you were just, actually no one, like very few people were supportive. Very few of my conscious friends were supportive of that decision in the moment, but are supportive, but didn't like it, And so, so I started Vyvanse at the same time that you started smoking the THCA. And the THCA was with the game plan of not using it very often.
Right.
And how did that work out?
Oh, not good at all. And that's the thing that's like, it's like, that's what I keep convincing myself, is that I've gone through these cycles, and at some point I will understand where the balance point is. And then I want to be able to just use it, consciously and not get down that dark hole. And it just so quickly moves into that because of my tolerance level. So it builds up so quick too. And then I'm like not really getting there, and I know I can go further. So I was quickly, into it started for maybe like a week. It was just in the evening when I was trying to be creative. But the thing is, it didn't even really work with the creativity like it used to. It used to make me so creative and I could just make the craziest art. And it doesn't work like that anymore to me. I had maybe 10 minutes when I would go down there, and it'd be like, I'd feel really great. And then I was not feeling it anymore. And so it wasn't really even working, but I still would do it just to kind of take the edge off of any kind of mundane part of reality, or having to go do something that I need a little more focus
We did get a lot. You got a lot done around the house.
And that's what's good for it for me is like, again, I'm high functioning. So if I need to do like a house project or something that's usually taxing and takes a lot of focus, like if I get high, I'll just whittle on that thing all day. But these are all, you know, they're slippery slopes into something much darker, and it's very subtle. And that's why I believe that I've been doing this, is trying to figure out that subtlety, and not so I can then use it in balance. I think it's to just get off of it and understand a different aspect of all that is this world and what it is to like actually be able to be autonomous and not want and grab external things, like just be with oneself.
Yeah. So a few things. I don't want to forget this. So I want to mention this first about synthetic versus plant things.
Okay.
There's a clip that was going, he's so cute. There's a clip that was going around social media of Indigenous people interrupting a psychedelic conference and trying to warn that the way Westerners, white people, whatever, engage with these plants is dangerous to everyone. And they cited tobacco as an example of it. These plants have spirits, and they're meant to be engaged with as you're engaging with a spirit. When you do mushrooms, you are engaging with the mushroom spirit. It's not just simply a snack. You know, you're taking the mushroom, you're smoking the weed, you're smoking the tobacco, however you're supposed to take kratom, kava. All of these are indigenous plants, or plants that are connected to indigenous cultures, that I think Westerners can use, but I don't think we are supposed to use them. I have not bypassed the part where I feel like this is going to trigger people, but I do not believe we are supposed to be using them in the Western consumer way that we use everything else. I think
medicine in the West is like this. It's become this thing where like, what is the medicine that I need daily to be able to function?
Yeah.
So medicine is like it is like a snack in the West, where I think in the ancient culture, medicine was like a ceremonial thing you do every now and then. And because of that, you brought a lot of intention and respect to it, and you conversed with the spirit, and you did all of that. And in those moments, it would heal you, and you would not use it again the next day. You integrate and you move through and you expand your consciousness. That's how it's meant to be used. We in the West have just become like normalized to abusing chemicals and stuff like that. And I think there's a purpose to that. It's got us all like addicted to every little fucking substance because we're encouraged to take it every day.
Yeah, we're very conditioned with parasitic consciousness, and so we are consume. And so we have, and then also, I don't know how I feel about the hyper processing of a lot of these things, but once weed became legal, then it became an industry. And once something becomes an industry, you're not just dealing with like the fact that we're maybe doing all these things more than we should be doing them. You're also dealing with, when you're talking about a plant that has consciousness, and this goes to even food, you know, mass-made food, processed food, everything's conscious. And so everything we're putting in our body has consciousness, and it's going to hold the consciousness of who grew it. And then we are living in this reality, which is not going to last much longer, but the cross of planning has us eating food. We don't know who grew the food. It's a corporation, so it's lifeless, and it's being created by greed, and then it's covered in pesticides because of greed, you know, and everything's expansion and consume and consume and consume. And so we're just like these zombies shoving things into our bodies. We're not thinking about it. It wasn't thought about when it was grown, whatever. And you corrupt the spirits in these plants, and they come for you. And so, you know, the warning, which, you know, I'm sure if you search like indigenous or native protests for psychedelic, whatever, to come up. But the warning was like, you guys are going to hurt yourselves fucking with these spirits in a way that's completely not intentional. And, you know, the Western hijacking of psychedelics is, you know, obviously gross. So, excuse me. All of these things, you know, kratom, I think is, nature's answer to pain relief. And I do think all of these things do serve a purpose, but then when a corporation turns them into a tincture and puts them in a gas station, of course that thing's going to fuck you up, And when you go into a bar serving the kava, and this is something that's, meant to be in a ceremony that's supposed to feel a certain way, and you walk in and the bar has all of the same, I don't even know how to explain it, spirits, like literal spirits that are usually in bars they're like attachments, they attach to people. All that energy was in that bar. I was like, holy shit, this feels like a fucking bar.
Mm-hmm.
You could feel all the sadness and the divorce and the fucking addiction and stuff in the room.
It's like in the middle of the day too.
Right. But we're doing this with like these sacred things. And so in the new age consciousness, spiritual spaces, I do think we still have a lot of this kind of Western consumerism stuff that we've not deconditioned yet that is impacting our relationship with all of these substances, And so I do think that plays a major role. The commodification and the corporatization of all of these things is changing it. Just like there's a big fucking difference between weed now and weed when I was smoking it 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is the natural like balance that's coming for everything is like these things have to get so out of whack that they actually start hurting you.
Yeah.
And that plant that used to be medicinal has now become toxic.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we see like the highly processed versions of these just to get that crazy high. That's not, and then you're using that every day. I mean, I believe this is like a degradation of consciousness under the guise of expanding your consciousness. That's what I've experienced personally. And I thought that was bullshit like idea before until I experienced oscillating on and off of it. And there's so many things like, I mean, the short-term memory from smoking weed is great. Like you lose short-term memory. It's like a real thing. And understanding more of these like real macro ideas from the Wave series from Laura Knight, Yazik, the game we're in, the predator's mind, that we've been given the predator's mind, and like this entire idea, how hard it is to like see that, and because we are it, and so that the predator knows how to like activate the chemical makeup within us to do something. It's a very hard game to play, and that's what we're dealing with. So like for me, I want to be able to like understand those substances and try to understand the chemical reaction that's happening, I guess, and being able to get there on my own. And I think the body is capable of doing that. And I don't know if I can like really get into it because I understand it, but I'm not sure if I can talk about it. But funny enough, the way this always works in reality is like the synchronicities were so funny. Like right when I stopped everything because I finally got the message, I was like, oh fuck, I need to stop. That happened to be on the eclipse. It was like perfect timing with like letting go of something that's not working. I was being shown that. I picked up the last book of the Wave series that I've been slowly finishing, and I hadn't read it for like a month or so. I'd just been off of it, and I picked it up, and like the first page I started reading was about this exact thing, the chemical makeup of our brains being a certain way that essentially is saying, when we take in these external chemicals, they attach to a certain thing that's called, it's scientific terms are going to sound stupid, but it's a ligand and a receptor. The chemical comes in and attaches to a ligand that then activates certain chemicals and attaches to a certain receptor that then activates a cacophony of certain reactions that make you feel a certain way or do a certain thing. And so these chemicals are like the precursors to certain emotions. And this is why like I think a lot of us are run by our emotions, and that's the predator's mind being able to like move you around and make you do stuff without you knowing. And that was so alarming to me. But the key to this was that the fact that the chemicals coming in and attaching to a certain ligand to create the whole process means that you have the capacity, the body has the capacity to create that chemical reaction on its own. If done that way, that seems to be the secret to all the mystics and the secret to being able to actually expand your consciousness. The other way, is a secret cloaked version of degrading your consciousness while making you feel like you're expanding.
Yeah.
And that shit was like, that's the first page I read after I stopped. And I was like, that's exactly what I needed. That I had felt that, like I had thought that in the past, that this seems to be something, the first time I ever did mushrooms. I remember when I came up into that high and started seeing everything and seeing the core of everything, I was like, this feels so weird because it feels like I can get here without the chemical. I don't know why I thought that. I was just like, the sensation of it, it just oscillated into a different frequency of all it was. And so I feel like I should be able to navigate that on my own. And I spent then 6-7 years like trying to figure that out, but getting caught in the trap of just only expanding by grabbing the external thing. And so once I finally read that page, that was like, that was the message I needed. I'm done. I want to figure out how to do this myself. And I've talked about it on the podcast. I've had experiences of being in that frequency, like the cannabis frequency without cannabis.
Yeah.
And when I smoked cannabis, I went down. And like I had that experience. I fucking know that's what happened. Yet I still got caught back in this again, you know? And I think all of it does come back to like the core thing to me is like, why are you doing it? And if the simple answer is, I just want to, I think more. Why do you want to? There's something, for me, I was avoiding it. I was avoiding like just being with myself and all the uncomfortable parts of that. And then also like having to let go of control. Because the idea of like being able to control our reality, i.e. grab the thing to make myself feel a certain way, is to avoid the sensation of that weird negative emotion. Like I want to control and keep that at bay.
Right.
If you let go of control and just let that thing come in and process it and deal with it, for me, I have experienced an expansion, but then I have gotten caught up in a different form of something that I can't deal with, and I'll grab the thing again. And I think that's like, I call those little feedback loops that like if you allow yourself to go experience it and trust, like drop an anchor and go into it and trust that you can follow that rope back to where you started, that's a valuable experience. And I think that's what I was doing, consciously or unconsciously.
Like letting it play through, not judging or shaming yourself for going back and smoking weed again, which I think is...
I wasn't going to be able to be told any of that information. Right. I had to go fucking experience it. Even if I was told it, go experience it and go, that's real. Like that is true. I experienced that truth. So now I'm going to integrate it and move forward.
Yeah, because I did freak out one day, finally. It was it was like a month ago, about feel freeze. Because that's when I connected, like, oh, the feel free is the reason you were depressed for months, which is the reason you then wanted weed, because life wasn't having meaning. It's the fucking kratom that's making you feel like life's not having meaning. It's at a fucking gas station. How spiritual could it be?
Gas station opium, man.
I came in 2 guns a-blazing and you were like, are you all right?
Yeah. And I'm glad you did that. And I'm glad you just let me keep going. I was like, just trust me. I got this. I'll figure it out. And I'm glad I experienced it. I really am. I'm glad I didn't go too far. The withdrawal is a fucking bitch.
Yeah. How's the last
Well, I don't know why I decided to stop them both at the same time.
Very Mark coded.
Very extreme. So I'm experiencing both symptoms of the withdrawal of both of those. I've experienced cannabis THC withdrawal many times, so I can deal with that. For me, it manifests, like I said, clammy feet, clammy hands, sweaty sleeps, just schwitzing all night, like, and that sucks. Temperature regulation, I am cold all the time. I can't, and I've learned that like THC actually fucks with your hormones that regulate temperature. And so that's like the hardest part. And then that's all the THC stuff. And then the combined with the kratom is mostly like, I feel like I have the flu kind of a lot of the times, but it's not the flu, which is so hard with the opium stuff, because when you start feeling sick, it's like when you just have some more, the sickness goes away right away.
Yeah, Instant. That's why junkies call it getting well. They don't call it getting high. They call it getting well.
And that's the worst state to be.
Sorry if anyone thinks junkies is derogatory. We use these words.
Yeah.
When I started talking publicly about addiction, non-addicts would show up to defend, and I'm like, God, shut up. We shut up with puddle water. Yeah. It's okay. We can handle words.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and that's like, it's a pretty cloudy consciousness. It's like a little depressed, but it's nothing that I can't handle. And I know that it's just, this is the thing. If you make a decision to do this, you got to experience the effect of that. And the effect is like, now you got to deal with 5-6 days. Maybe it's 2 weeks, but then you'll be free. You'll actually feel free.
Yeah.
You not feel fucked.
Maybe that's what it's called. You'll never feel freer than when you get off of this shit.
When you get off of this shit, Yeah. So yeah, it's rough, but like I know I did it myself. And so I'm just, riding through it. And it's crazy when you look up on like Reddit, feel free support and like withdraw. It's just forum after forum of people, their stories. And there's a lot of really cool support in there, like different tricks people are using. You can use other like herbs like ashwagandha, creatine, radiola or something.
I do not know how to pronounce that shit.
And I've been doing a lot of that, like NAC stuff to just support your brain, your nervous system to like ride through it. And it's made it a little easier. The other shit part is insomnia, not being able to really sleep very deeply.
But you're like tired, but then you can't.
Tired, but then you can't get in. I can't get down into sleep. Last night was the first time that I actually had like a deep sleep. So it's been 5 days of that. And a lot of like restless leg syndrome kind of stuff at night. Just a lot of like aching and moving. And so, yeah, it's not fun. And I just, that feel free thing, like don't ever, I don't ever like telling people what to do either, but unless you want some eye-opening like results of certain decisions you make, I just wouldn't fuck with the feel free. I told you yesterday, I think I'm going to make some stickers that match the color of that logo that just says, it's like a blue background and then in cursive just says fucked under it. So I can go, because I see all these ads all the time everywhere. The ads for Feel Free are so promising that they're going to like release you. But I just want to take those stickers and just plop them on every ad that I see that feel fucked. Because that's literally what it is to me.
Have you had like hardcore cravings to just go get one and relieve yourself?
Yeah, my body has, but I'm just,
You're like just resolved.
Yeah, I'm just resolved. I got that message and I'm like, no, that's not going to be the answer, buddy.
Yeah.
It's not going to last. So yeah, I really haven't, and I walked in like the day after I quit. Funny thing too is like you always get messages from you get symbols and messages from the universe. It's whether you want to listen to them or not. And I take those very seriously. And so like the day that I knew I should quit, but it was like, I'm going to go get one more case and just slowly wean off. Because a lot of people suggest weaning off. I was only having 2 a day. It's not compared to 12 a day. You want to probably wean, but I was like, I'm just going to go get some. So I went to the gas station. They're always full. They always have stock. No stock. And my guy wasn't there. It was some other new woman, actually. It was like the whole place was changing. It was like a weird new timeline.
Eclipse season.
Yeah. I literally felt like I was on a new timeline. And so I was like, oh, motherfucker. I'm not supposed to get it. Okay. And so I just went home. Oh, no. You know what it was? They had one bottle. That's what it was. And so I was like, okay, I'll take the one. And that was the last day I had it. So I took that one. And then took that as a sign, like, you're supposed to just fucking stop this. Probably 2 days later, I was in a different gas station and saw a full thing of Feel Frees right at the gas station. And I was like, I could totally just grab one and chuck it right now. But I was like, absolutely not, Mark.
Yeah.
And just walked out. It's tough. I mean, the body really wants it. But I think this is what we're learning is like how to discipline. Where's your willpower? Like discipline is a thing. And there's like different ways we can learn it. And it's tough, but I already feel better. Every day I'm feeling open and better. And that it's so much better than the place that I was at just trying to stabilize with the Feel Free.
Right. Yeah. And so I think something that both of us are learning is about the technology of the body and how the body operates and what the body wants. And it's different for everyone. I do want to get at some point digestion in human design. So I have closed taste. And so my body just wants the exact same thing. And I'm like that. I find an outfit I like, I buy it in every color. I just wear the same outfit every day. I find, I walk the same path every single day now that I walk. I eat the same 2 meals over and over and over and over again. And then I can never eat them again. And I switch. And I drink the same drink over and over and over again. And then I can never handle it again. And then I switch. This is very much how my energy works. And the last couple of years have been about us finding out what food our body likes, when it likes to eat it, whatever. And then right before Kava, you had been on the kind of Jack Cruz, get up with the sun shit for a long time. And then once Feel Free started, you like slipped into staying up late, sleeping late. You've never been someone who sleeps late. You're sleeping till 11 o'clock in the morning. You're not craving protein. You're craving sugar. You know, it's like, and then your face starts to look tired.
Puffy eyes.
Yeah. And it's the getting to know like the technology of the body and what the body needs to support it. And then learning about how the brain actually works, learning about dopamine and, all these different receptors and, serotonin and melatonin and how all these things function and how the Western habits that we have, like looking at the blue light in your phone at night, is fucking up the melatonin, and starting to see the body as, this piece of technology vehicle that we are riding. And that if we allow the mind to undermine the body, then we just end up, the passenger ends up on a shitty ride because the mind was like, well, I didn't want to be bored. So I decided to avoid boredom by abusing the body. Yeah. And so, I was tempted not to bring up the beta blockers because I knew we were going to talk about this, but I think this is a great example of there just aren't clear boxes for anything. There is not a this or that. There is not a, for a long time, I was 100% sober. I wouldn't even do psychedelics for the first 7 years that I was sober. And then I did mushrooms once or twice, back to back in a summer. And then I was sober for another 5 years before I ever did psychedelics again. And I was, for the first 5 years of being sober, wouldn't even be around you if you were high or whatever. I was very strict about it. And then I eventually realized, like, I'm sober because I like to be sober. I don't have to worry about what other people are doing. And even in the time I was doing psychedelics, I really would just prefer to be sober. It's just, when I was young, I was in my 20s, I did meth every single day for 5.5 years. And I did wake up during that time, and meth, I think the combination of meth, sleep deprivation, meth while sleeping, because it keeps you in the hypnagogic all night, the lifestyle of meth, and just me personally needing to go do that because my mom was a meth addict and I needed to retrace those steps. I went through my awakening on that drug. And for a long time, I thought that drug was the reason that I was awake. And also now, as an adult who's on Vyvanse, I understand that a lot of what I was interpreting as meth making me magic, I am now realizing it was medicating my ADHD. And so my ADHD was medicated for the first time in my life. And so I thought that I would have to do meth forever in order to stay awake, in order to stay magic. And I did achieve extreme magical aspects of reality while in that state, because it's basically a psychedelic. However, it was all mental. My entire awakening was mental. I did not learn anything about my body. I did not learn to be embodied. I did not learn anything about healing my trauma. I was a horrible, shitty person who was projecting. I did not become self-aware on meth at all. I became aware of aliens and higher consciousness stuff, which to me, that stuff is pretty useless if your entire awakening is only happening in your mind.
Yeah.
Because if you're not aware of your own subconscious, there's only so far we can go, because we are just living in projections. And so,
and you're in a body. You're like,
you're
that's
in a body.
the main thing. You can't just live in the mind all the time.
And so for me, the real fucking healing that I've experienced, I would say in the last 7 years, was as I became aware of my own experience. Previous to that, I'm playing out victim stories in relationships and projecting my insecurities onto other people and interpreting what they're doing, and it's actually my own shit. It's the same thing when I say, like, I get on stage and I interpret people as scowling at me. They're not scowling at me. I'm projecting, right? The ability to start to come into awareness of my own subconscious stuff, I think, is largely just to do with that's what the planet is doing. And so I've been able to access that. But I do also think that being sober the majority of the time contributes to that. And so, thank you. You're just like sitting on my bladder.
Not me, the cat.
Mark, get off my fucking lap, dude. I never intended to quit doing meth because I did think it is what made me smart. And what I'm calling smart was medicated for ADHD. And I thought it made me conscious and was able to access all these things. And when I quit, it was kind of a spontaneous decision. And I did lose access to those files for 18 months. I did go, as I was coming off the meth, I did lose access to all that. And then for like 18 months, I really didn't think about it much, but I was like, oh, I used to think I was an alien and that I could cure things. And I used to know this stuff, but I didn't really. And so then I was just like, oh, it's just drug shit, I guess. And then on 11/11/2007, almost 2 years after I got clean, it all came back. And it was, I almost had to re-wake up, but have it be real this time, because before it was just, it wasn't integrated. I don't know that it can be integrated when you're altered 24/7.
I don't think it can either. And that's the thing, is like we were talking about the ancient medicines, they weren't using it like that. You don't hit it all. You don't do that all the time. You do it once to understand a certain thing, and then you work to integrate as you are sober. Right. And that's, if you go to like proper ceremonies, that's very strict. That's what you do. You stay there while you integrate soberly. And maybe it's 4 or 5 nights in a row, but then you integrate for a week or whatever it is. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's possible. And I wanted to believe it's the other way, but it just isn't.
And I also just don't know. And this has been fun. This experience with you has been a real mirror for me on like letting other people live their life. And I'm usually pretty good at that. I mean, like a lot of times with the kids and stuff, it's like, yeah, I know that you and I know that they need to do this, but they have to figure that out. So we just sort of have to sit here and wait for them to figure it out, But I obviously felt like I had a dog in the fight sometimes, because I do really enjoy you more sober. And so I had to keep checking in with myself. It's also when you're the sober one and everyone else is altering all the time, it feels lonely. Yeah. And so I've had to, over now 20 years of being sober, I've had to check in with myself, because I definitely overstepped boundaries with like my sister, who is an addict, trying to rescue her from using or whatever. I'm like, okay, how much of my savior complex here is that I'm just bummed that you're not on the same frequency as me, But in times where you were going to go back to smoking weed, we would have conversations where you're like, I'm going to use it in moderation. And I'm like, yeah, everyone says that, and it just doesn't work. And I don't know what moderation is. I don't think it exists. I think that what some of us think moderation is someone who's not that interested in using it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I can't eat sugar in moderation. If I eat some sugar, I then will go on a sugar bender. until I get off of the sugar bender. There's not a moderate amount of eating sugar for me. There's sugar benders and no sugar. And I used to obsess over food, because food I've experienced the most addiction stuff with. I used to watch other people seemingly be able to eat sugar in moderation, and I'm like, oh, they just don't like sugar. Like, they're not people who like sugar. So when they eat the sugar, they're not going to be thinking about sweets for the rest of the fucking day because they don't give a shit about it. Moderation doesn't exist, I don't think, if you like the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like people who smoke weed once a week and then don't think about it the rest of the time, they just don't care about weed. It's not, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I mean, the moderation, maybe it exists, but I agree. There's like most people that I have been like jealous of that seem to have a balance with weed. It is like it's on a different frequency or something. They're not like, it's almost like they get high, but they're like on the verge of like, this is almost too much, but this is fun. Like they enjoy it a little bit, but it's just then the next day they're actually looking forward to like being chill the rest of the day.
Right.
Where for me, like, yeah, I want to be in that space all the time. Like, can I just go there? And that is coming from, I'm dissatisfied with being here with myself. You know? And so like, maybe that's where moderation is when someone's not grabbing at it and trying to own it, trying to get it all the time, then you fall into some kind of balance that is moderation. But you can live without it. It's neither here or there. You know, it's not ruling you. It's not possessing you. And that's where I'm talking about this predator's mind thing. It's so interesting because it's like we get possessed by these desires, and some of them are at the core of like being alive and being in a painful reality in separation. We want to unify again. And so like there's certain things that create those dopamine hits that immediately go, do that again. Yes, please do that again. And some of those are for purposes like sexual desire. It's like so we can create more beings. It's like, yeah, that's a good feeling. I want to hit that again. So that secures that we keep procreating, we keep expanding. But it's a labyrinth of like these chemical kind of like webs that can be activated, and you can be puppeted. You can be possessed by a certain thing. And that's like at the end of I mean, we talked about this the other day, is like I do feel like I was somewhat, it's not like, it sounds stupid and woo-woo in some way, but I do feel like I was being attacked. There was some part of me that was, I'm like on the verge of expanding into a new thing that I feel like is going to be really great for me. Something that I really want, and I'm on the verge of that. I felt like I've been in that for a while, and this was something to steer me off track. And it used the exact thing that I'm most weak, my weakness. It like used that. And I'm able to create a narrative of like why I should be allowed to use that, which is part of the predator's mind, is part of the attachment. And that's like, that is what it is. And like, it doesn't make me go, oh my God, I got a fucking attachment. I got to go get a shaman and get off it. It's like, no, the frequency is the attachment lives on that frequency. Get off the frequency. The attachment doesn't feed anymore. It has nothing to eat.
Right.
So then it leaves. And that's a simple process, but it's a real thing. And I think we're all navigating our own labyrinths of who we are, our conscious desires, and the inability to balance certain emotions. And that's where the feeding takes place. And that's why I'm saying it's like if we're stuck grabbing external things to make ourselves so we can control the emotional state, that's an illusion, and we are like being fed on. It's a degradation of consciousness.
Yeah. Do you think also because you've reached the like 6-year point of being awake, there's something in that first like 3 to 5 years, it's nonstop getting your mind blown, nonstop exciting. The threshold between the the external reality and learning the internal reality, and it's like everything is possible and oh my God, that eventually dies down. Do you feel like, and you've reached the point where that has died down, do you feel like part of you was still equating weed with it being that exciting?
Yeah. It's kind of similar to what you were saying with meth. It's like I woke up through the mind. Cannabis was a huge part of that. And yeah, I think for a while I associated that state with being a higher, like a wider consciousness, more awareness. And then when you start to achieve regular, more awareness, and then that becomes normal too. And so then you're like, well, I want to get that expanded fucking flighty feeling again. That really like everything is beautiful and like it's all perfectly aligned. And but the weed didn't do it anymore, because again, it's like I was in a different frequency. Now you smoke the cannabis and you start to abuse it, you go down into that lower frequency again. And that's where then I could see, I was like, oh, it's an illusion. It's somewhat of an illusion. I've done other work and I've gotten to this other place. Now I can see the cannabis brings one down. And how funny that I thought that earlier was like so high and expanded, and it was like my ultimate being, I am cannabis. This is great, but it's like this kind of ever evolving thing, and I just, the thing, it's like I feel it to be true. And I'm learning more and more about like the biochemistry and stuff of our like brains and everything. But like, it just, with everything else that is incredible about the human body, the ability to regenerate, like certain organs can regenerate themselves. That is magical. What the fuck is that? That's incredible. And I think that when the body is actually not being poisoned and we are really elevating the frequency of our body, I feel like the body is going to be able to do things that are outside of our capacity of possibility, that are somewhat in like a magical realm of regenerating and being able to have longer lasting lives and create these states naturally. And one thing I do think about, like I've experienced, and there's stories of like people in war torn, like if you're a soldier in war and there's adrenaline, you're trying to survive and you get shot or you get cut or something. A lot of people tell stories that they don't feel any of that. There's almost a euphoric thing that is occurring.
Yeah.
Because your body is like aware that it is in a potentially like life-threatening scenario, and it will start to flood the body with whatever chemicals are needed to get the person through whatever is going on. So guess what? It's firing to that ligand and the receptor thing. It's firing a chemical that's equivalent to what we would say is morphine, that makes the person not feel that pain so they can keep moving. And then once they are out of the danger, then the body's flooded with the pain and the nervous stuff, so you can go fix that thing so it stops bleeding. That simple idea is like, that's what I'm saying, is like that to me proves the body's capable of making these chemicals. You just have to put yourself in the right state of mind to get it to happen. And, for the morphine thing, it's like, I don't think we have to put ourselves into war to do it, to get a high, but that it's showing you it's there. And I think that's what we're trying to learn. And I think we're on the precipice of being able to have a lot of expansion and innovation in that space, which I think is also why we've got the feel freeze and all these other advanced fucking dead ends coming in to try to prevent it from happening. Those are all synthetic chemicals coming in, hitting those ligands and receptors, making it feel like you're having that experience, but it is a degradation of the entire body.
Right. Well, and it's just, I don't know, because it's funny that this was all happening during my pharmaceutical era. But so with the stage
fright. Pause
fright.
for 2 seconds. Can I pee?
Yeah, I got to pee too. The way I orient to substances is I just don't want to have to be on something forever. And part of the reason I don't want to be on something forever is because I just don't know how long these things are going to last. And I remember when I was on meth, I knew that we were going to go through some sort of collapse. And so there was always a part of me that was like, if I need this substance to function, what am I going to do when I can't get this substance?
Yeah. I think that's like, it was a huge thing for me too. That feel free, like I needed it every day. If in the middle of that, like something happened, like everything shut down, you couldn't get it, and it was a time that you needed to do something to survive, I would have been going through a withdrawal for a fucking week.
100%.
Like,
I think I said that in the day of my freak out, is like, we know that there could be some sort of huge something happen and we're going to be in survival mode and you're going to be going through withdrawal. Like,
yeah,
you know,
fuck, man.
And so with hormone therapy, in theory, I would be taking that forever, but there is a part of me that understands that the shit could very well hit the fan and I'm not going to have access to these hormones. And then it just kind of is what it is. I'm dealing with menopause, you know? When we found out that there was something wrong with my thyroid, there wasn't something wrong with my thyroid. I was drinking 6 fucking cups of soy milk a day in my addictive hot drink.
Conversing with the soy spirits. Abusing the soy spirits.
Abusing the soy spirits. Here's what's so funny about this. So I just wasn't functioning at all. Like I was getting work done, but I was not moving my body. And I was, you know, I was like watching the muscle deteriorate, my mobility, the mobility of an 80-year-old right now. And that's getting better now. And I couldn't even get out for a walk. Like to go out for like a 10-minute walk felt insurmountable. And so this is what made me decide to start taking Vyvanse. But in my head, I'm like, I can't now need the Vyvanse because what happens if you can't get the Vyvanse? And that's already a thing. I mean, the collapse isn't even here yet, but that's already a thing. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm going to use the Vyvanse to reprogram my dopamine because my dopamine is currently set to the phone and to hot beverages. And what's really funny is I was very zeroed in on, I have to quit drinking the matcha lattes. Do you remember that? Like I have to quit drinking the matcha lattes because I'm on a hamster wheel of needing a matcha latte every hour.
Be normal.
But then I need to sit with the matcha latte. And when I sit with the matcha latte, I get on the phone and then 5 hours goes by, I'm back to another matcha latte and that's all I'm doing. And then I'm a little bit dizzy because of the caffeine. And so then I have to eat something and then I end up eating whatever. I'm just like trapped. And what's funny is I think, intuitively zeroing in on there's something about the matcha lattes that are fucking me up, but I was only thinking about the matcha and we're getting like good matcha, you know, but once again, this is a ceremonial fucking plant and I'm drinking it all day. But I wasn't thinking about the goddamn soy milk. So what was actually happening is the soy milk was fucking my hormones up and tanking my thyroid hormone, which was killing my metabolism and my energy levels, which is why I didn't have the stamina to get up and walk. So it was fucking my body up. And then the only thing that would make me feel better for 5 minutes is the little bit of caffeine that I was getting from the matcha lattes. But then also your thyroid hormone going down makes you very sensitive to caffeine. So all of these symptoms I was experiencing were the results of
soy spirits. And
so I want to call the episode Feel Fucked, but no, I kind of want to call it Soy Spirits. So anyway, all that to say, my plan when I went on the Vyvanse was for 6 months, I will reprogram my dopamine to equate dopamine with exercise instead of hot drinks. And I have had a coffee in the morning, a matcha, a mud water, a chai latte, something. I've had a hot, creamy beverage upon waking since I was a teenager. And since I've been on Vyvanse, I think I'm on my 3rd month, I have completely kicked that habit.
Yeah, you're off it completely. It's amazing.
And I am addicted to 1-hour walks.
So that's like really tactful, like I think smart use of certain substances, certain things. However, there always is the risk of getting addicted to it. And if you know that going in, that's what I was saying, it's like drop an anchor. You can find yourself back. it's not for the faint of heart. You got to be conscious. You got to be self-aware.
Well, and I really thought about it. And then that's why I went into the doctor or the prescriber, and I was completely honest. I was like, I was addicted to meth before, he's like, well, Adderall's not an option. I was like, I don't want Adderall. I've researched it. I think Vyvanse. I started at 30 milligrams. Some people go all the way up to 70. I've actually gone down to 20, and starting next month, I'm going down to 10. And then I think I'll probably be done with it by May. I've gone days without taking it, and the walk, we have solidified the walk as where the dopamine comes from. Yeah. So now I'm walking at least 1 hour a day, often 2 hours a day. I am off of the creamy beverage train. I maybe have 1 or 2 a day. I'm mostly off caffeine. I'm completely off soy milk. And I'm taking half of a dose of the thyroid medicine now, but I'm pretty sure that the entire thyroid thing was the soy milk the whole time. I've been using soy as creamer for a really long time.
A lot of people don't like soy. There's a lot of new information coming out about how bad it actually is.
The thing that's confusing about that, because I have such a sensitive body, I just didn't know that part. I mean, to be honest, a lot of my perimenopause stuff was because of that globulin thing. And I'm just so interested to see that blood work. I feel completely different. The brain fog is gone. I have energy. I feel clear. We'll wait.
This is what it's all about, though, learning those new sensitivities. Yes, you are a very sensitive person, but you're ever evolving into more and more sensitivity. And that's the thing is it's knowledge. You got to seek knowledge to understand. We never know everything.
Right.
And it's that constant openness that I think is what really expands. Is you got to be open to everything. I may be doing this a little too much. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I want to go experience what is too much. That's okay. But no, there's risks involved.
Right.
And drop anchor and be able to get back. And I think that's what we're all doing. But when we do get so biased and so sure that this thing is healing me and we become identified with it, that's when things go wrong. We're less open to observing what the real lesson is here,
Yeah. But it also swings the other way, because I think for a long time, I am someone who learned coping mechanisms and life hacks for ADHD, and I like that. I prefer that. It definitely is much easier on Vyvanse, but I don't want to have to do this forever.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in a position where if the shit hits the fan, I can't get it. And I know that as these systems are falling, I'm I just don't know that this is going to be available. So I would rather go back to flailing but be able to do that than the other way. But the beta blockers, and we'll close with this, the thing that's funny about the beta blockers is that, so my relationship with stage fright really just comes down to social anxiety. I have stranger danger. I get in a huge surge of adrenaline when I am conversing with someone I don't know. Happens a lot. And when I get on stage, the adrenaline hits very hard and it causes brain fog. And it's the same thing if I'm talking to a cashier. It's just, I don't know what to say. I'm my processing slows way down and stuff. And so the smaller the crowd, the more intense the adrenaline has always been, because there's an anonymity to a bigger crowd. Mm-hmm. It is just basically social anxiety for me. So if it's a small, intimate crowd, it really activates the social anxiety. And in my years doing stand-up, I would have to learn how to navigate that adrenaline rush and how to be on stage and wait for the adrenaline to kind of slow down or whatever. And because I have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of shows to get ready for this recording, I don't really have the time it takes for me to then retrain my body, condition my body to be able to do this.
Because you did it before.
I've done it before many times. And it eventually gets to the point, if I'm on stage consistently, I have trained my body that it's okay.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot for me. And it also, I am not putting myself into a lot of social situations, because that's a big part of it. It's just sitting in the green room with people I don't know. It already activates fight or flight. And so nervous system work helped a lot. But one thing about what I learned about my nervous system is that when I'm put into positions where I'm expected to mask, so when I'm around people that are on a different frequency than me and I can't connect to them authentically, or there are certain aspects of comedy that are fake, and so then that also kind of throws me out. The way that I regulate my nervous system in a situation where I go into fight or flight is to acknowledge that I'm in fight or flight and you know, give my body a second. And you can't necessarily do that in a green room full of strangers who are not on that frequency. You know, if I was like, sorry, I am, you know, whatever. Anyway, I simply do not have time to figure it out in the next month and a half. And so I learned about beta blockers, which they just block the receptors for adrenaline, I think. And so I can feel where the heart racing and the hand shaking and the quivering voice would be, but it just doesn't show up. It's so strange. And the first time I took them, we were driving to that show in Fayetteville and almost died in a car accident. Like some guy cut me off, but luckily the robot car we have warned me that something weird was happening. And so it beeped. So I slowed down, and the guy who would have killed us in his giant monster truck just missed us by about an inch. But anyway, that would have caused, especially on the way to a show, would have caused a huge like nervous system reaction. And I felt nothing. And I was like, oh, this is so strange. But other than that, because I'm not taking the beta blockers that like affect your brain. This is a different kind, a milder kind. But anyway, it just makes it to where I'm not navigating the body freaking out about it. Now, if I was going back to stand up full time, to me, this wouldn't be something I would even consider, because I'm not going to take beta blockers every night for the rest of my fucking life when I don't even know what condition you need it for. It's like, I'm going to be on stage 15 times in the next 3 months. And I actually tried not to take, I used them and had a couple good shows, and then was like, I'll try to take less tomorrow night. And I still had the adrenaline. And so I'm like, all right, we'll just do this for this. But if I was going back to stand up full time, no, to me, that's not a tenable option, because I don't know what other effects those are having on my body. They seem relatively safe, but I don't want to need this if it's something that I'm doing long term. So that's, I don't know, that's the way I engage with things, where I used to be rigid and I wouldn't even entertain that. I'm just going to play on hard mode.
Right.
And now I am, in my pharmaceutical era, open to using things as a tool, but I am still very resistant to needing things, because you never know when you're going to lose the thing you need. I feel the same way about relationships. If I need you, I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position. And I think this is such a lesson from the Cross of Planning to the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, because in the Cross of Planning is all about, it's okay to need things outside of you because they're always going to be there. And the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is like, don't put your feet on anything, because nothing is solid ground. And you're going to learn that lesson over and over and over again. So I am very oriented toward, am I putting myself into a position where if I don't have this, I'm fucked, you know?
Yeah. And there's this thing I learned about, you got to take this with a grain of salt. It's a paradox. It's difficult to get through, but the idea of need and want are STS frequency based.
Oh, that resonates.
Yeah. But it's hard because it's like, we need food and we need all of that stuff. But guess what? Actually, the need to have external sustenance to get the body to work is because we're in an STS reality. So the fourth density STO potential is a state of being that you do not need external things to give energy. You get it from the inside, you know? And so I had to sit with that for a while, because I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But but there are things that I actually do need to survive. So how do I deal with that paradox? But I think it's what it really is getting to is like, when you need or want something, it's saying that you don't have it. You're not okay by yourself. And so that's just a trap. It's like you can get lost in the matrix with that. It's just, you can want and need anything, you know, but it's quite a thing to sit with. Is like, what is the state of being that is not trying to grab and need and want something? it's a state of just being and being open and allowing things to occur is what it is.
I think that's going to be so much the lessons in the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is everything we have convinced ourselves we can't live without will be pressurized, and it's to push us into our own power.
Yeah.
And then we realize like, oh, that is also self-sustaining. And I'm not claiming to have figured that out at all, but I resonate with that's where it's going. And when I am experiencing limitations,
it's a lesson of some sort. It's all lessons.
All right. Well, we have to record so many episodes to get ready for me leaving. But next week I'm in Portland. That's already sold out. I'm in Mesa, Arizona on April 2nd. Salt Lake City on April 3rd. Boise, Idaho on the 4th and 5th. I can never remember the other place in Idaho on the 6th. Back in Philly on the 11th. Dosed up. Going to finish my set this time. Baltimore on the 12th. And somewhere else in Maryland on the 11th or 13th. It's all on my Frederick, Maryland. It's all on my website. And then that's it. I don't think I'm doing this anymore after that.
I'll be here.
Yeah.
I'll be here withdrawing.
Mark will be here with
taking care of the kids in the house.
Mark will be here with his sweaty spine.
My sweaty spine.
Yesterday we were driving home and I look over and Mark is blowing on his hands.
It's the worst, dude. It's just like constant sweaty, clammy hands. Ugh. It's crazy though. The body's doing what it needs to do, man. It's just getting rid of everything. Got to support it.
Yeah. So take this episode how you will. Hopefully we didn't offend.
Yeah, I know it's a sensitive subject, and I'm not telling anybody what to do. I think just trying to authentically share our own experiences. And for me, I've definitely learned a lot through these feedback loops and going to experience the pits of hell. And I feel like for me, I've gotten a message that, just attempting to share. Maybe we'll talk about the predator's mind or something next time. There's some other cool shit that I feel like I'm finding.
We have piles of things to talk about.
Yeah. I'm doing sessions available to talk about withdrawal and no, about creativity and projector stuff, all the same. Or we can talk about withdrawal too.
All right, love you, bye.